So today we're talking about the 3 biggest challenges that I saw inside of personal injury law firms. After working with more than 1,000 firms inside their operations, there were 3 main things that really stuck out. Number 1 is on the intake side and the leakage around your intake staff, lead gen sources, and how to really maximize your conversion rates after you talk to the lead to make sure they actually sign up. Second is actually your disbursement process and how you go from case closed to actually sending payments to your doctors and to plaintiffs. And finally, I want to talk about just some myths around virtual staffing for personal injury law firms and how to optimize your virtual staff to make sure they actually work, you can save money and scale efficiently. Starting with the intake leakage, and this is even firms who are generating 100 plus cases a month. There's a few things that they don't have that they should definitely have in place. First is they should offer in-person signups. So there's a lot of different companies out there that will actually go to your client's house or office or anywhere that they are and get them signed up in person, and they're actually incentivized per sign up. So you don't even pay unless they get the client to sign up. So they're an amazing closer for your office. Second is you want to make sure you have, I recommend an overseas staff that follows up on every single lead that comes in. The way that we do it is I actually treat it like every single lead is a grenade that's about to explode in your office. Whenever a new personal injury lead comes in that you're maybe spending $500 on or $300 on that can really change your law firm, you wanna make sure you're handling it very, very carefully. So you have this person who monitors the leads that come in, and usually they're actually incorporated in a Slack channel. And so inside of Slack, the new lead comes in, if no one's responding to it in the first 10 seconds, they're assigning it. They know which intake staff are available and they're saying, John, Sarah, Kayla, call this lead right away. And then once they get the feedback, they find out the lead is not good, they find out the lead is a different practice type, or they find out any information, they're updating the tracking sheets, they're updating the lead generation companies, and they're making sure that if it's a good lead, they're getting an update on the status of that lead and making sure they can convert it. If it needs to be spoken to an attorney, if they have a question about your retainer, you know right away and you solve it right away. But that's one of the main things with the intake team, because most of us know within the first 10 minutes of a personal injury lead coming in, they're probably getting calls from a dozen other people. Their friends and family are referring them to other lawyers. And so if you don't have an opportunity to talk to that person first, they're getting the craziest sales pitch of their life from another law firm who's promising them the world and might not even be qualified to handle that case. So you want to make sure you have everything in place so the money that you spent on that lead can actually become a signed client. Next is make sure your team has some sort of protocol. The protocol should not just be sign up clients. It's whenever we get a new lead come in, they should have an opening script and a closing script. If, for instance, a lead comes in and it's a personal injury client who's involved in a hit and run, you want to train your staff to say things like, oh my God, Attorney John, our attorney, handled 100 cases just like this. And just last month, they handled a hit and run case where they couldn't find insurance to go after, or they found out they were working on their job just like you are, or they found UIM, or all these different things. These are things that clients remember, and they would rather go with you than even somebody that their parents refer them, because they know you've handled cases just like this. And so actually training your intake staff to handle the lead, their objections, their questions, all of that will also make your staff much more comfortable on the phones and your clients feel the same way. And lastly, you want to treat your intake team like a sales floor, not like a reception area. And you want to make sure your team is incentivized to close these leads. You want to make sure they're incentivized to follow up with the client. And you want to make sure you're auditing them, or you have somebody on your team, another virtual staff or whatever, listening to these phone calls, putting them into AI, getting feedback, and actually offering coaching with the agents. Or they would give the feedback to the managing attorney, who will then have a 5-minute phone call on a Friday and just say, hey team, this is what we did great, this is what we didn't do so great, and just have the AI notes and just read it to your team. It makes a huge difference coming from the actual attorney for the staff to be able to care about the firm just as much as you do. And you want to make sure the staff actually know who you are and that you've actually spoken to them before. Different members from the team, just a 10-minute phone call, introduce yourself. The second biggest challenge I see in a personal injury law firm, out of the 3 biggest challenges I see, is around the disbursement process. This is one part of the practice. There hasn't been too much innovation or anything really set up. And so as many of you know, this is the current process. Whenever a settlement comes in, you're supposed to notify the client that their client funds have arrived and hit the trust account. So the accounting notifies the case manager that funds have arrived. Lien negotiation starts back and forth, and those are through phone calls and emails and very hard to track. the collection of documents, we know, setting up a settlement sheet, getting it signed, then printing out all the checks, creating a settlement packet, sending, and then having the actual attorney sit there and sign all the checks. And when I go into these offices, I'll see attorneys with a stack of checks this big and just signing. And whenever you ask them, what are you signing? Half the time they don't know. Half the time it's canceled checks or lost checks. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it's just clients who will deposit a check, ask for another check, and send it to a cash checking place, and it's a whole crazy system that's going on. Lastly, they have to mail these checks and make sure they actually get delivered, and then reconcile it and wait for these checks to be deposited so you can have a three-way reconciliation for your IOLTA account and account management. And which is why we actually introduced a new platform called Disbo that helps automate this entire program. So whenever a check comes in, Disbo automatically recognizes that directly from your IOLTA account. We're integrated to it. We see all the transactions. We push that information into your Filevine Clio, your case management software, so you can see deposits in there. We automatically generate a settlement sheet. You can also automatically do lien negotiation in the platform. So you can see how a lien goes from $100,000 down to $30,000 or whatever it is. And then directly from the platform, you just press send. And instead of medical offices receiving 30, 40 checks every single day, they now receive 30, 40 direct deposits directly in their accounts. And plaintiffs now also receive direct deposits directly in their account, directly from your IOLTA account. Much more secure and a lot lower chance of human error for the law firms. And lastly, the system automatically does three-way reconciliation. So you don't have to worry about closing the books at the end of the month. It three-way reconciles and then pushes all the data to QuickBooks and in your case manager software. So you can now see you paid Dr. John on February 4th for $5,000, and it's quick and easy to see. It's not a mystery. The third topic, and this is one that is pretty close to my heart, is the virtual staffing side and the myths and how to actually implement virtual staff. We're not going into too much detail. We'll do another video going into crazy detail about this. For firms who have not used overseas staff before or have used it and it hasn't worked before, I wrote a book about it, and so you can actually go and find these on Amazon, virtual staffing for law firms. The quick summary, if you haven't used virtual staff before, is that the first 60 days is the most important part. And what happens in the first 60 days is your team doesn't want to use the virtual staff. Your IT is not set up correctly. You don't have KPIs and SOPs and things in place to manage remote teams that well. And maybe they're not as trained as you want them to be. And so for the first 60 days, it might fall off. Now we have law firms, and I've worked with law firms, and we've implemented more than 50 to 100 overseas staff inside of these firms. They're saving millions of dollars a year through using virtual staff, and they're able to dump that money back into marketing. And so not having this set up will make a huge difference for your law firm. It will really depend on how much money you could spend on marketing or how much money you could take home. So I urge you, when you're first setting up virtual staff and things are going wrong, to fight through the pain and get it set up correctly. If you want to keep virtual staff happy and make sure they stay with you and grow with you, the pay rate that you give them is not the most important thing. It's important, but it's not the most important. They come from a culture where they care about the work environment, they care about how they're getting spoken to, and the infrastructure and the way that things are set up. You want to make sure that you take the time to set up an environment to actually welcome remote staff, remote team members. That means setting up your SOPs, KPIs, and deliverables that you actually want from these people. And then making sure they're actually trained on it. And whenever you have a performance issue or you have something go wrong, it's one of two things. Either they don't want to follow the directions, they don't want to follow instructions, or they weren't trained properly. And so when it comes time to talking to your virtual staff and fixing things that may have gone wrong, you just want to have those two conversations. Was it training, or was it they don't want to follow the instructions? And then you can have the offboarding conversation. But a lot of times it falls onto training. And so the best way of actually getting your overseas staff trained is, for that position, I would just set up a Zoom call. I would set up a Zoom meeting room and record one staff in your office for the entire day. Record their phone calls, record their screen, record everything they're doing. And you can now plug that into 100 different AI tools, and it'll create exact instructions of what your staff and what your team should do. And it'll cut the video for you so that they can go in and learn and re-watch portions of it to actually get trained. That's option B. Option A is you actually create a real training department and training team that actually can help onboard these virtual staff better. And after you get the first one done correctly, they usually can train other staff as well. The last thing I'll say about virtual staff is you might want to look into different countries for different roles. Staff who are located in closer to the US border, Mexico and like El Salvador, for instance, they're usually much better for sales and for intake and for closing clients. And then when you go more to Central America, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Colombia, those staff are really good for the case manager roles and other back office tasks that just help facilitate clients. Usually their retention is a little bit higher and they don't need a fast-paced sales, high commission role. They just want to be able to have an impact in your company, improve treatments and improve case management and go from there. And then any opportunity that you have that you don't need a Spanish speaker, Philippines is amazing. There's so much talent there. There's about 7,000 islands in the Philippines, and each one has kind of different dialogue, and their English speaking is different almost in every single island. And so if you pick or hire from, Manila or Cavite or other places, you might have that better English. It might be a little bit of a higher price, but you can get staff that meet your qualifications. You just have to know where to look. Okay, and so if you're able to fix these 3 areas, then your firm should just run a lot smoother. Your clients should be much happier and probably a lot more profitable as well. Those are the 3 main ways that I see the low-hanging fruit for improvement. If you have any questions or anything about this, go ahead and leave it in the comments or DM us and somebody from our team will reach out and try to help if we can.